There he is. No, we hadn't started yet. It's, yes, sir. I'm just glad it's not as cold as it was last week. That would really make a mess out there. I didn't want to feel slighted. How you doing, brother? Good. Good to see you. Oh, well, I guess we can go ahead and get started this morning. You cold? Well, I've been out of pocket all week, so I don't really know what's been going on. But I do covet your prayers. I know Walter's been under the weather. He's and you can tell that just by looking at him. But no, we won't keep Walter in our prayers. As I said, I've been going through a lot of stuff right now. I don't know what's going on. Doctors haven't been. Well, they're going to tell me Wednesday what's happening. So I'm just hoping it's not another one of them stents or anything like that. But the last time when I started losing oxygen, that's what it was. So yeah, I covet your prayers. As we get going this morning, no, here they are. Well, hello there. I got Spencer and Taylor. They're in town, and good to see them. And I guess y'all gonna be going back when? After lunch. Okay, so and then Corbin's in town. Everybody that came in for birthday get-togethers, and let's see, Trip, Connor, and Rowan. Kind of put them all together and celebrated with a fajita dinner yesterday, and it was good. It was good, but good to see all these kids. We are in Isaiah the 15th chapter today. Okay, before we get going, let's have a word of prayer. And Walter, would you mind wording our prayer this morning?
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for being our God and for loving us, for your wonderful creation. As you do with him, so we can do all the things you say. Father, just ask you to bless all of us, give us, and help us to always be thankful and to be loving, kind, and generous. Please keep all kids' family safe, Father God. Please help them to be the Thank you, Father, for loving us.
Amen. All right. I don't know if you've noticed this. Walter brought it to my attention. The picture that I have up there, if Walter didn't go to the barber shop, think about it. Does kind of remind me of him. All right, Isaiah 15. Now, the sign lies. This PowerPoint was ready for last week, but last week didn't happen with me. So actually, 2 weeks ago, we were in the book of Isaiah. We started in chapter 13, went through 14. And in chapter 13, it was the oracle or the prophecy against Babylon. Now remember, this prophecy that begins in 13 against Babylon was 160 some odd years before it ever happened. All right, Babylon wasn't even Babylon wasn't even a power when this started happening. All right, it was oracle against the nation of Babylon for what they were going to be doing to Judah, and that's what an oracle means, by the way, is a divine message. And it was a taunt against the king of Babylon, who hadn't even been born yet. And we're talking about remember Belshazzar, the one who the handwriting on the wall, meaning tinkle and all that. Well, he was the one that the prophecy was directed toward. And so he was the one that was going to be falling. If you'll remember over in Isaiah 14, we talked about Isaiah 14, chapter 7, or verse 7 rather, that, oh, how art thou fallen from heaven, O day star? Well, King James says Lucifer. And of course, Lucifer was a taunt that Jerome put in there against old Caliphurus. And the Luciferians at that time who had been fighting. So anyway, Lucifer is not the devil. I hope you all remember that. But this was a taunt against the king of Babylon. Oh, thou art the man, is what he says. And then in chapter 14, verse 22 through 23, it was the final judgment of Babylon. Hell was going to fall. And then he shifts from Babylon to Assyria, which was now the powerhouse here. In 14, 24 through 27, they're going to be falling. And so, he's going up against Ahaz and all those guys. And because of their ruthlessness, God brings judgment against them. Even though they're his tool to bring his people to his knees, they broke the covenant that God had with them, where they were supposed to protect the innocent and what have you. And they were just ruthless, killing men, women, children, babies, and all this other stuff. And then was the judgment against Philistia, or the Philistines. And Israel had trouble with them all throughout their history. Still going on. Okay, and it will be going on forever, I believe. But that's where we were in chapter 14. Now, this week, what we're going to be getting into is some more taunts against other nations. And in chapter 15, what we see here, it begins an oracle against Moab. Just the very first verse, or part of the first verse, talks about a prophecy against Moab. So this is something that's not happened yet. It's something that's going to happen. And you say, well, who were the Moabites? And so I'm going to give you a little bit of history about the Moabites, who they were and what have you. And if you'll remember Lot and his wife and daughters and all, they were fleeing from Sodom and Gomorrah. And old Miss Lot, she turned around and looked back toward the back, turned into a pillar of salt. And Lot and his daughters kept going. Well, they wound up, they leave a city called Zor, and they go settle in the mountains. They're cave dwellers, They live in the mountains. Now, Lot and his two daughters, strange things are happening, and you've got to put yourself in the minds of these people in that day and age. All right? We think it's atrocious, and it is atrocious. But what happened in that day and age, they didn't think anybody else was around, and the bloodline was going to be done away with. So one day the older daughter said to the younger, our daddy's getting old. So what we need to do, there's nobody around here to give us children, so let's get our father to drink wine, sleep with him, and preserve our family line through our father. Now you think about this. You've got one man, two women. When the man dies, who's going to take care of the women? That was their thinking back in that period of time. You had to have a male person around to take care of them when they got up in age and everything else, because they didn't have Social Security like we do today or anything like that. So you had to have a male heir to take care of you, a husband or something like that. And so that's why they're interested in having a male heir to help take care of them. So let's go ahead, let's put daddy to sleep, get him drunk and everything else, and let's get a father. So they get their old man drunk, and the daughter goes in and lays with him, and old Lot, he was so drunk he didn't know when she came in, when she left. And so the older daughter had a son. And the daughter's son named him Moab. That's where the Moabites come from. This is a family fight. Remember, Lot was a nephew of Abraham. And so Abraham's one of the promise. That's where the Israelites come from. So with Lot over here, the Moabites and the Ammonites come from his daughters. And so when we look at this, it shapes the story about Lot and his daughter, kind of shapes how Israel viewed the Moabites. As a matter of fact, when they looked at the Moabites, they saw it shameful, dishonorable, disgusting that this was going on. All right? By this period of time, incest was already condemned. Okay? So the Moabites were children of incest, and everybody let that stigma carry along with them. So the Israelites looked down upon the Moabites. So during Israel's interest in the Promised Land, if you'll remember Balaam and Balak. Balaam was a prophet of God. Now, he was not an Israelite. He was a Gentile, but he was still a prophet of God. So that tells you that God still had dealings with people who were not his people. You follow what I'm saying here? And so Balak asked Balaam to go ahead and go curse the Israelites. He says, I can't do that. God told me not to. But he figured a way to get some money. All right. And what he did is he went out in Numbers 25. He brings the Israelites in and lets the Moabites seduce them. And they get into idolatry and sexual immorality and have all these wild orgy parties and things like that. And a plague comes upon them and God's anger upon them. God brings judgment upon the Israelites because of the sin of the Moabites that they sucked them into. So later on, the Moabites, all throughout Israel's history, there's struggles between the two of them. King David, he goes to Moab, and over in 2 Samuel 8, he conquers the Moabites. And that's kind of a back and forth thing between the Israelites and the Moabites. They're always fighting one another, and it's a family feud. But later on, Moab beats Israel, and they gain their independence once again. So you have a fellow by the name of King Mesha of Moab. And I don't know if y'all ever heard of the Moabite stone, but the Moabite stone has been found. It's over in the Louvre, I think. Where's the Louvre? I forget now. In England or France? Huh? It's in Paris, right? But anyway, this Moabite stone is held in the museum over there. And what's so important about that is King Mesha of Moab fought against the Israelites, and that stone tells what happened and everything else, which verifies the biblical account of the battle between the Israelites and the Moabites. King Mesha beat them. So why is God announcing Moab's fall here in 15? Because Moab is not doing anything right now, all right? Well, the reason being is because the Moabites, like Babylon, like Assyria, like the Philistines, were very prideful. This is our nation. We're tough. We're strong, Nobody can defeat us and everything else. And he was arrogant, kind of flipping his nose in the face of everybody around. They worshipped a false deity. Many of you have heard of Molech, right? Anybody ever heard of Molech, the false god? Molech was a god where they sacrificed children. Chemosh was a god of the same nature. They sacrificed their children to them. As a matter of fact, what we have here is Isaiah says that God pronounces sudden destruction upon the city of Moab, or upon the Moabites, the nation of Moab, here in 1b. What he says is, Ar in Moab is ruined, destroyed in the night, and Ker in Moab is ruined, is destroyed in the night. Give you a little idea about Ar and Ker, all right? When you look at this, Ar, or the Ar, however you want to say that, it is the heart of Moabite power. It's the identity. It's kind of like our Washington, D.C. It's the capital city, okay? And it's their capital region. And so what he's saying is your capital region is going to be, or your capital city is going to be destroyed. It's going to be destroyed like that. Now, Ker, when you look at it, it's destroyed in a night. And it's not just the capital city being hit. What happens is this is their last line of defense, so to speak. It's the walls of the city, their defenses, everything. It's a fortified city. And what he's saying is even that is going to fall. It's going to be brought down. And then he goes on and talks about there's going to be mourning and lamentation throughout the land in verses 2 through 4. He says, Dibon goes up to its temple, to its high places, and weeps. Moab wails over Nebo and Medeba. Every head is shaved, every beard cut off. In the streets they wear sackcloth. On the roofs and in public squares they all wail, prostrated, weeping. And so the idea of shaving, that's when you shave the beard, so to speak, that was a sign of mourning. And the shaving of the head was a sign of mourning. Mourning of disaster, the death, destruction, and things like this. And they're wearing the sackcloth. You'll remember that's a sign of remorse. You get out of your fancy clothes and everything else. Well, what about Dibon and Nebo and Medeba? What are they? Why did God just single those things out for the people? Well, the reason being is because Dibon, by the way, is kind of a play on words. Dibon means blood. Dibon is kind of a play on words. All right, city of blood. So what we have here in Dibon, it's a capital. It's a city, but that is where the temple of Chemosh, their false god, is located. One of their main temples. That's where it's at. And so when you look at that, Chemosh, remember I mentioned King Mesha of Moab a while ago? Well, King Mesha, if you go over to 2 Kings 3, verse 27, he sacrificed his living son, who was probably about 20 years old, sacrificed him to Chemosh. And the way you sacrifice to Chemosh is you throw him into a burning fire. And you burn them alive. And that's what he did to try to beat the Israelites when they were attacking him at that time. So, Chemosh was a god of it was terrible, like Molech in the Old Testament, which was a parallel. That was, you had other nations do that. Israelites didn't really worship Chemosh; they worshiped Molech, which was the same thing. By the time you get over where Jeremiah is at, okay. So Chemosh had a lot of pull around the area, and when you get to read your Bible over in 1 Kings 11, verse 7, Solomon, who's supposed to be the wisest man in the world at the time, he builds high temples in places for Chemosh. In other words, he's allowing the worship and child sacrifice in Israel by building a temple along that line. That's what you get when you marry people who are not godly. All of us, remember he had 300 wives and 700 cucumber vines? Wasn't that the way it was? And so they led him off into idolatry, and to appease everybody, that's what he was doing, building idols up everywhere. That brought Solomon down. But anyway, Chemosh was a very important figure. Now, Nebo, that ought to get something in your mind. Remember, Mount Nebo was where Moses stood and looked at the promised land. He couldn't go in, but that's where he was at, on Mount Nebo. Well, Mount Nebo, according to the it is now in the land of Moab, and it's one of their high places. It's a place that's very important to them. It's associated with the worship of Chemosh. Here you have Moses going into the promised land, looking at the promised land from Mount Nebo, and by the time we get to where we are here in Isaiah 15, it's a worship center for Chemosh. So God is going to bring Nebo down. And go a little further. Medeba is sitting on a highway, kind of like I-10. All right, it's a corridor of trade. It's a very important thing. Medeba was very strategic for everybody. The reason being is because if goods were going to be coming into it, it would have to travel along this road, kind of like the King's Highway, all right, or what they call it, the Silk Road in China. Where all this travel is taking place and the trade goods are going. That's what happens at Medeba. Well, God says Medeba is going to be brought low. That's why they're going to be wailing over these things, because the temple's going to be destroyed and all that. In the streets they wear sackcloth. On the roofs and in public squares they all wail, prostrate and weeping. Then Heshbon and Elah cry out, and their voices are heard all the way to Jahaz. That's from one end of town to the other. And the armed men of Moab cry out, and their hearts are faint, which means the soldiers, when judgment comes against them, when they are finally destroyed, when the Babylonians come in and take care of them, even the soldiers are weak because they're looking at mighty forces and all that. Well, Heshbon and Elah, these are important cities. And the reason they're important cities is because Heshbon, once again, when we look at that back over here, it is a very... If Nebo was the capital city, all right, Heshbon is kind of like the New York, all right. It is the place of high culture. It's the place that it's a beautiful metropolitan city for Moab, for the Moabites and everything else. So Heshbon just kind of, they lift it up and say, look at what we've got, what we do here. They have all the entertainment, all the sex, traffic, drugs, anything you want, you can find it in Heshbon. It's the capital place. It was the It was the Rome of the Moabs. Okay, so that's going to be brought down. And then Elah, that was the place where fertile fields. When you talk about agriculture, this is it. It's not like the Dust Bowl we saw in Oklahoma back in the 30s. This is a place that is fertile. It's growing, everything else. And this is where a lot of their food supply comes from. And so what God is saying is all these cities are going to be brought down. So what do they represent here in Isaiah 15? Well, when you look at it, these cities, every one of them, are the pride and strength of Moab. And God is saying, I'm going to bring them all down. Nothing is going to withstand anything. All your capital cities, all your food sources, all your worship centers, and everything else are going to be falling down. I'm going to rub it in your face and let you know you shouldn't be as prideful as you think you are, because Moab's not going to have any strength left. So their security, their economy, their religious system, everything God is bringing down in one whack when he brings judgment upon the Moabites. And the mourning and wailing from Dibon to Elah kind of paints a picture of devastation. It's kind of like, remember when we studied in Jeremiah, how when the Babylonians came in and Judah fell, it was Judah falling all over. It wasn't just Jerusalem. It was the little cities around and everything else. Everything was wiped away. Well, that's what's happening to the Moabites. Nothing is going to be spared. It's kind of like going from the East Coast to the West Coast. Everything is going to be gone. And so God is what he's doing. Remember, Moab was very prideful. Look at us. Everybody else, the Israelites looked down their noses at them because how they were born out of incest to begin with. But they rose up in pride. Look at us. And they were powerful. They had a good army and everything else, and their false gods were all there. Well, God says, I'm bringing them all down. You're not going to have anything left. All right? So what's the key takeaways for us here in this section? Well, number one, earthly security is fragile. And they trusted cities, gods, wealth, and everything else. Nothing could save them. Bring that over to today, folks. We have a very powerful nation, don't we? We have the largest aircraft carriers in the world. We have the best aircraft in the world. We have the best weapon systems in the world. Nobody can compare with what the United States has. Really? Really? I remember back in the 60s, somebody told me at one time, says, you give me 50 men with a 10-foot length of chain, each of them having a 10-foot length of chains, we can shut down all the major power grids in the United States. You know, that's true. Take that 10-foot length of chain, swing it around your head a little bit, throw it up inside of a terminal station. It hits the buses in the terminal station. What happens to the power? It's gone. And you could wipe out the entire tower grid. What else? It only takes one nuclear bomb going off up in the air. And I'm not talking about around, on the ground killing people. I'm talking about a high elevation to create what we call an electromagnetic pulse that would shut down all the lights in America. No computers, no telephones, no anything. That's all it would take. And so if we start trusting in our political systems to protect us when our political system gets wicked, we're in trouble, all right? Because they're not the ones that's protecting us. If we start trusting in, money, take a look at what's happening with money right now. All right? And I'm glad they're opening up Fort Knox, by the way. I want to see if there's anything in it. But anyway, the whole thing, and right now I'm not getting political here. What I'm saying is we cannot put our trust in the strength of humankind. Moab learned that. Things that we consider security today can fall apart in an instant. All right? Next, God rules over all nations. You have God in this prophecy starting in chapter 13. It shows us that God is ruling over the Israelites, northern kingdom, southern kingdom, the Babylonians, who aren't even in existence as a power yet, the Assyrians, the Philistines, the Moabites. You just go through the whole thing. Everybody is under God's control, even among the enemies of God's people. So we need to remember that we are citizens of the kingdom of God. Okay? That is where our loyalty should be. Now, yes, I'm also a citizen in the United States, but my trust is not in the power of Washington or the military or anything else. My trust should be in God, and my service should come to God. That's what we need to remember. Okay? So God's moving all the time. Remember in Revelation, first chapter, he's sitting on his throne ruling the cosmos. And that includes us. Okay? Even though they're bringing this judgment upon all these nations and everything, Isaiah 15:5, Isaiah is crying out for the Moabites, showing compassion. And God's justice is never without compassion. And we need to remember that. One of the things that we see in this section of Isaiah, it's more than just ancient history. And a lot of people think, oh yeah, ancient history is interesting to some folks. It's not just ancient history. What God is doing us, and he's telling us this story over and over and over, all throughout the Bible, that nothing in this world is secure apart from God. Nothing. Okay? And we need to keep that in the back of put it on your back burner and keep it there, okay? Now, this is Isaiah's personal response in the first part of chapter 15, verse 5. What he says, my heart cries out over Moab. Now, this is Isaiah. He's crying over Moab and what's going to be happening to them. He says, her fugitives flee as far as Zoar. Now, remember, Lot and his wife left Zoar. They're going to be going back, all right? And as far as Eglath and Shalisha, I didn't have a map. I should have put a map up here. But what's happening is we're going to see people traveling all over the place, trying to get to high country, trying to get away from the judgment that's coming. Isaiah is looking at these people who are going to be destroyed by the Assyrians as they come in and do this. And he's not gleeful. You know, a lot of times we are gleeful when we see people dying. And I guess that's the human side of us. Humanity, you know, I don't get mad, I get even. And we kind of cheer. You know, they knocked out Osama bin Laden. They knocked out the ISIS. They knocked out all these people. And it's true. We're glad they're not on the plate anymore. But being gleeful about it is something that we need to be careful about because it shows us where our heart's at. We are more concerned with not the people and what they're doing. We should be concerned about their souls and their eternal destiny. Isaiah was concerned for these people. He wasn't gleeful. As a matter of fact, he looked beyond that and saw the inhumanity of what happens in war. All right? Yes, we all want to see, we all look forward to seeing crimes punished because that just makes the world a safer place for us. But remember, when death is involved, whether it's in the Ukraine, in Russia, or, you know, China, Taiwan, the Japanese, no matter what, makes no difference. There are souls being lost. Souls that God cared for. Souls that Jesus dies for. And so when something like this happens, yes, it's our relief. Maybe God is doing it, what have you. But there's still people who are going to be stepping off into eternity and be lost forever. And that's tragic. But that's exactly what's going on with this. That's why Isaiah is weeping about what's going on here. He's not indifferent. It actually bothers him. He feels this compassion for these people, even though they're an enemy. He feels compassion for them because of what's happening to them, all right? And so we need to keep that in mind. So Moab, 5 through 7, got these refugees are trying to get away, to get to a place of safety. They go up to the hills of Luhith, weeping as they go. On the road to Horonaim, they lament their destruction. The waters of Nimrim are dried up, and the grass is withered. The vegetation is gone, and nothing green is left. So the wealth they have acquired and stored up as they carry away over the ravine of the poplars, their heart cries out over Moab. Her fugitives flee as far as Zor, Eglath, and Kelisha. I think I didn't cut the part of that off. What happens is, what he's saying is the refugees are going, and there's nothing there. Think about traveling all that distance, even if you have cattle or livestock or anything else, and you're trying to get where you're going. What's going to happen if there's no food for them along the way? The grass is dried up, right? What's going to happen if the water is all dehydrated and you've got, thousands and thousands of people and there's no water? What happens to them? That's an agonizing way to go. And so that's why it doesn't make any difference when you're in that situation. Who cares how much money you have in your pocket? Who cares how many jewels you have? When you get into a situation like that, where you have no resources and everything else, you're sitting there and you're going to watch your children die along the way. This is why Isaiah has got compassion on these people, because even those little ones are going to be suffering. Now, God's going to take care of the little ones, but they're going to be suffering along the way. So we need to remember this. All right, so we have a universal cry of despair going on here in verses 8 and 9. It says, their outcry, these are the refugees, their outcry echoes along the borders of Moab. Their wailing reaches as far as Eglaim, their lamentation as far as Beer Elim. The waters of Dimon are full of blood. Once again, that's a play on words. Dimon and Dibon. Play on words right here. It's the bloody river. It's going to actually be full of blood. But I will bring still more upon Dimon. In other words, even though these refugees are fleeing, more judgment's coming. There's going to be a lion among the fugitives of Moab and upon those who remain in the land. And the lion is a metaphor for the armies that are coming in. And even fleeing, they're going to be caught up in it. And so this is a tragedy, but this is what's happening when God brings judgment upon a people who reject him. All right? Excuse me. So what are the key themes here in this section? Well, the key themes that we're looking at here. God's judgment. Have you heard that before? Every chapter, God's judgment. Every chapter, he's bringing judgment upon mighty nations, powerful nations, strong nations, but they're brought low. They're destroyed. They're leveled. Why? Well, God's mighty hand. If you'll remember, Romans 13, the nations exist. Why? Thank you, sir. The nations exist to protect those that do good and to punish those that do evil. When the nation gets in such a situation where it's flipped that upside down, they have breached a covenant with God. God allows nations to come into power, but he expects them to take care of people good and punish bad. When they flip it over, the nation becomes bad and the good are suffering, God brings judgment, all right? Lifesaver, right? Thank you. All right. And just remember that. God does bring judgment upon everybody. This nation is not immune. We can get so far away from God, it will be brought low. Think about it. Every nation on the face of the earth has risen in power and fallen. All right? Compassion amid judgment. And what happens is we see Isaiah's heart breaks for Moab. And so when we look at prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah, Nahum, Zechariah, we can just go through all of them. They're not heartless. Well, maybe Jonah. No, I can't say that. They're not really heartless because they care about those people under judgment. least Isaiah and Jeremiah and all those do. And so they're going down, but their heart is compassionate. Why? Because they're human beings. They're creatures. They're God's creation. And they understand why the judgment is coming. And we need to remember when we see things like that happening, why is it happening? It's because of evil in the world, and God is allowing the evil to do his will against evil. Bottom line. All right? The futility of human security, cities, wealth, armies. Ultimately, they can't protect anybody against divine judgment. We need to remember that. Powerful places can be brought low in a heartbeat. All right? Take a look at this now. California. When I was younger, California was it was a beautiful place, still beautiful in places. All right? As a matter of fact, you get out of the major cities, it's like up north. Oh, it is beautiful up north in California. When I was in the Navy in 1962, San Diego, it was something. Just walk around the streets and everything was just so clean. Had those old, what they call them, bottle brushes plants. They were nice and all that. The weather was wonderful. You know, and of course in San Diego in August, the sun didn't come up till noon. That's because it was so foggy until the sun burned it off. But I loved it. I wanted to go back. In World War II, a lot of people went back to California. I don't want to be there now. Not at all. Why? Because look, it's deteriorating. It's falling down. Slowly but surely. And a lot of people, you know, they can care less if it just slides off into the ocean, you know. But what's happening here, it's falling apart because of people. It's a beautiful place, but people are destroying it. City of Houston, when I was a kid growing up, you know, I grew up in the city of Houston. It was a good place to be. I remember getting on my bicycle and riding around. As long as I was home before it got dark, you know, I was fine. Okay? You don't let kids do that nowadays, anywhere. New Iberia, back in the, oh goodness, long time ago, what, 70s? Before that, maybe, maybe in the 70s. Booming, oil industry. Port was running full swing, everything. What's happening now? You know, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much at all to put things over. So we can't put our security in things. I remember going to work one time, or my daughter going to work one time, and she was teaching at Loma Linda. Went to work, and she no longer had a job because they closed everything down like that, you know. So this is what we're talking about. What looks perfect on the outside and all that can be destroyed in a minute. We need to remember that. Next, the reality of suffering is something we need to understand. War and destruction led to displacement, grief, fear, and real human experiences. And that's not just in war, all right? Look around you. There are people who are suffering all around us because of evil in the world. That's just the bottom line. People suffer. Now you say, well, we can't take care of everybody. No, we can't. And so, you know, you see somebody that says, hey, I'm hungry. You want to do something to feed them if you can. What happens when you go and say, you go over and buy them a hamburger and a Coke and all that and give it to them and say, oh, thank you. And then you see them walking across the bridge here at New Iberia throwing all the food off the bridge. Well, that's between him and God. Me and God are cool, you know, because are there people out there who are trying to get in your back pocket? Yes. Does that mean we shouldn't be compassionate? No. We need to be compassionate. There are ways, when we were here, when I was full-time here, every day or every week, somebody was coming through the front door wanting money, wanting gasoline, wanting groceries, wanting something like that. And I remember the first man that ever came in here. And I was sitting in my office. Of course, the desk was turned around at that time, and I had my back to the door. And I hear this behind me. Now I jump and I turn around and look, and there's this guy standing there, and he is dressed in it's a dark green shirt, sleeves rolled up, his cuffs heavily starched. He's wearing a little, what do they call it, little, like a golf hat, little white one. He's got rings on all of his fingers, a gold watch on his head. And he says, hey, can you help me out with some gasoline? I says, well, I don't carry money here. We don't have any money here. And I just started. That's probably the first week I was here. I says, and I don't know, I'm brand new. I don't know how to get a hold of anybody to help you. He says, well, you know where I can go? I says, you can try one of the other churches. I don't know. I'm new here. He walks out my door, crawls into a brand spanking new BMW with gold rims. Okay. Now, did he actually need money? Sell your ring, get some gas, And then there's other people like today. Harold and I were sitting out here one day, and this guy, I think we were boarding up for Lily the first time, and this guy comes up to us wanting gasoline. And we said, where's your car at? He says, out by coal back there. You walked all the way here to get gasoline, and here we are boarding up for the hurricane. And I couldn't help him. A few years later, ladies were having their thing over here next door, ladies' Bible class. They come out, and we're going to go eat lunch. Harold and Millie and Nita and I, we're going to go eat lunch. And as we're backing up in my van, I hear, hey, Pastor, hey, Pastor. I turn around, this guy walks over to us. And I recognized him. He said, Pastor, can you help me out with some gasoline? I said, where's your car? He says, out by the coal black pan. I says, you told me that same story last year. He says, no, I didn't. Says, you got a twin brother? He said, yeah. So what do? Well, yeah, you have to weed your way out of some of these things. So I developed a form, and I had people fill out this form because I said, hey, I don't have any money, but I turned this over to the finance committee. If you'll just fill this form out, we'll see about getting you some help. And they didn't want to fill the form out most of the time. So that usually weeds through the people who are doing these things. But there are people who actually need money. There are people who actually need help, need groceries and things like that. And I found out it's better to give them what they need rather than give them money for what they need. All right? There is suffering out there. All right. Are we done? Yep. That's it. We'll get into chapter 16 next week. Okay?